welcome back to my channel and to my journey in beauty. Today has been a much anticipated video and I'm so glad that you guys are excited about it in the comment section, and that is my favorite face brushes and how I use them. So we're going to go ahead and start with foundation. Now, full disclosure, I do frequently use beauty sponges, but we've talked about these before in other videos. I didn't used to prefer to apply foundation with a brush, but now that I've found with certain formulas, I actually really like it, especially a more sheer formula of foundation. So the one I use every day is from Bdellium Tools from the Golden Triangle collection. And this is the 957 Precision Kabuki brush. It has a very flat top to it, and then it's very densely packed, and that it doesn't overly absorb too much product when I use it. It does a nice smooth application, as well as I can even use this to pat in the concealer on my eyes and under eyes. I'm gonna use my little sample of the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Invisible Cover Foundation. I like to put a little on the back of my hand here, and then I go in and distribute it as much as possible around my face. To go in with that Kabuki brush I showed you. Any flat Kabuki brush is going to perform in the same way. You just want densely packed bristles that are soft and able to blend in your foundation however you like to do it. So what I like to do is in each section, I start with my forehead. I sort of tap very lightly, very lightly to distribute the foundation around my forehead evenly, and then I go back in with more swiping, buffing motions to blend it out. One section at a time. I have heard that mostly you want to start from the center of your face and work your way out in terms of foundation application, so that's what I do. So I just tap it in and spread it out, and then I use circular or swooping motions depending on the part of the face that I'm at to go ahead and buff that out. So that's one brush done. Any Kabuki brush will perform the same way. It doesn't matter the cost, but I do like this one. And I'm gonna have all of these brushes linked down below for you as always. So next is concealer. And today I'm gonna try and use up here my Urban Decay Naked Skin concealer. This is the brush I'm going to use. It is the buffing concealer brush from Sonia Kashuk. This is from her new line of brushes at Target. And here you can see that it has a slanted or chiseled edge, a nice flat dense amount of bristles right here, and I find that it acts a lot like a miniature Kabuki brush because they do have slanted Kabuki brushes. So I really like this. What I tend to do is just again buff out my concealer. I start up on my lids. I always put concealer on my lids and then follow up with an eyeshadow primer, and I go under the eye and make sure I'm just using little tapping motions, if you can see that. And I generally work the product up to right under the eye. I don't do any buffing motions with this, and distribute the product. And then if I feel like I need to, I will go in with a damp or dry beauty sponge and just make sure that it's completely blended. I just really like this brush because it is so densely packed and has that chiseled edge to it. It really gets up in all the little crevices of the eyes, no matter what your eye shape or your under eye situation, dry, wrinkled, fresh as a baby's bottom if you're in your 20s. I think this kind of brush and this kind of technique works. I like to go ahead and set under my eyes before I set my face, and for that I use the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Powder in the shade Diffused Light. It's just a creamy white vanilla, almost translucent powder, but the brush that I love for using under my eyes is the Real Techniques setting brush. Mine's not clean, so you know, hashtag real life, but it's got this beautiful oval shape and it is pinched at the ferrule right here, and it's just so soft and fluffy, and it's really nice to get up in the targeted areas under the eye. It washes nicely. I've never had an issue with Real Technique brushes. In fact, they are some of my favorites, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right, for setting the face, my current routine for summer is I've been going in and setting my T-zone with a translucent pressed powder. This one's from NYX and I'm panning it, so I'm not going to show you the progress. But the brush that I love using for stamping and setting my foundation, specifically in the T-zone where I tend to have oils come through during the day, is this little $6 brush here from e.l.f. It is called the e.l.f. blending brush. You can see we have this wide fan of bristles here, but when you turn it to the side, it is pinched. And so what you end up getting is almost like this lip-shaped surface up here, but also it has a buffing bit to it as well. Like you can press the powder into your skin, but then you can go back and lightly buff it, you know, very light pressure to make sure you don't have that powdery appearance. So I go into my translucent powder and tap off the excess, and I just press or dab at my T-zone with this translucent powder. And I do that all the way down the T-zone, over my lip, the sides of my mouth, and then the chin for sure. Then I go in with a more colored pressed powder, and I'm currently panning the number 7 pressed powder. Again, not going to show you the progress, but I am going to pick some of this up on the same e.l.f. blending brush and go ahead and apply to the cheeks, and then kind of buff all over my face in small circular motions and very light pressure. Again, you don't want to move your foundation around, but you do want to sort of kick off any excess powder that hasn't absorbed by this point. And then the next powder brush that I like to use is for a finishing powder. Now, finishing powders, you can absolutely do this last after you've applied bronzer, blush, highlighter, things like that. That is how they're meant to be used. However, my preferred method is I like to go ahead and do my finishing powder before I apply my colored cosmetics to my face, because I feel like it just dulls the color payoff just a little bit. So gonna go in with my tried and true ambient lighting powder in dim light, and the brush we're going to use is again from Bdellium Tools, and this is the number 980 large powder brush. Again, any brush will do. You can certainly find dupes for this at the drugstore. This is what I happen to have. But you have this nice fluffy brush here. It is pinched at the ferrule, so it has a nice flop to it, which is nice, I think, especially for a finishing powder. And I just lightly buff this over my face in circular motions. Again, I think when powdering, the method to the madness is just to go ahead and go, you know, lightly. What I like to call wet cat pressure. When I was learning how to paint, there's a YouTuber here who does sort of like paint party painting videos. Her name is Cinnamon Cooney, or the Art Sherpa, and she always talks about wet cat pressure, and that is if you were approaching a wet, pissed off cat, how cautiously would you go in? And she's talking about different amounts of pressure when painting on a canvas. And so I like to apply that to my everyday life using my brushes, and specifically when talking about powder. Next is bronzer. I'm gonna go in today again with my number 7 bronzer. I'll go ahead, even though I'm panning this one, I'll go ahead and show it to you because no pan yet. But brushes I like to use, or the type of brushes that I like to use for bronzer, look like this. And they are tapered brushes. They come to a point. The bristles are cut down the sides so that it comes to a tapered point. And here is why I like this. One, if you need to go straight in and you don't want to have an angle, you can go with just the tip. But also, when you're doing things like the cheekbone, hopefully you can see here that that just presses really nicely up against my cheekbone. I think these type of brushes would absolutely work for a blush as well, but these are my favorite types of brush for bronzer. Today we are going to use the Aesthetica P12 brush that we received, but this is the crown one, and if I can find it, I will link it below as well. I usually go in with just one side of the brush into the bronzer, and I like to start right up at the hairline right here and work my way down one side of the face and then the other. So going ahead with more of a targeted application from the tip of the tapered part of the brush and going to work that into the hairline. And then I lay it on its side like I talked about before with the tapered edge flat against my forehead, and I go ahead and do the temple like so. And I'm gonna have that tapered edge flat against my cheekbone again and go ahead and work some bronzer in to define that cheekbone. Starting closest to my hairline where I want the most color concentration, and then working my way down that cheekbone. I apply my bronzer right above where I would apply contour. Contour goes from the top of your ear down, and bronzer goes just right above that. So like right in this region right here is where I like to apply my bronzer. And you can see hopefully how I'm holding the brush here like this, just almost like a paintbrush or a pencil. And I find that that gives me the most control to go in the most light-handed. Absolutely, if you guys have any questions about these techniques or these brushes, please put them down in the comments. I always answer my comments. And then I'm doing the same thing, still using that chiseled edge of the tapered brush to go down under the chins. And at this point, I don't add any additional product, and I also try to blend it down into my neck. The tapered edge, the tippy top point of this tapered brush, is great for getting smaller amounts or smaller areas of products because it's more targeted. Sorry, you can't see. It's more targeted, so I can stay super close up to my hairline up here, whereas when I lay it against the skin on the side, you get a wider area of pigmentation. Blending brushes, and these are what is referred to as duo fiber brushes, meaning it has two different kinds of bristles. These are brushes where if you feel like your powder's gotten a bit cakey when you set, or you have any harsh lines in your bronzer or your blush or what have you, you can take one of these brushes in and it is going to help you blend just about anything out seamlessly. This is the 958 Duo Fiber Powder Blending Brush. As you can see up here we have these white bristles, and lower down we have the black bristles. The black bristles actually end, and that's why you can see this tuft of white at the top, and that is what helps you blend out your makeup seamlessly. And basically, again, I just go in with circular motions and I go exactly how I did my bronzer, and just work in circular motions to make sure everything is blended. And you can see here right away that the bristles have gotten dirty. That's the excess product, and that is exactly what you want, is to blend and make sure you don't have excess product on your face. So this is not something I do every day, but when I feel like maybe I've gone a little ham with the bronzer or the blush and I need to knock it back just a little bit, this is the type of brush I go for. Next we're gonna go in with blush, and I have a blush as well as a blush topper today because I want to show you a few brushes. First and foremost, I love the Real Techniques blush brush. The Real Techniques fluffy brush for blush is one that I reach for when I'm using an extremely pigmented blush, something that has a lot of pigment to it, and I don't want to overdo, you know, because you can always add more, but you can't take it away. You know, it's very soft and fluffy and bendable. And sometimes you want that, especially when you're talking about working with a very pigmented blush. But the one I'm going to use today, again, is from Bdellium Tools, but you can get this type of a blush brush anywhere. This is the Bdellium 962 Slanted Blusher, and it is an angled blush brush. You can see it is pinched here at the ferrule, and there's a slant that goes this way. So there's that chiseled edge there. For blush today, I'm gonna use this new little Butter London blush set that I got. I'm gonna go in here with this sort of apricot shade, starting at this apple of my cheek and working my way up toward where we put our bronzer. And I go like that. I like to do a lighter blush that way. And I'll do that on both sides, starting at the apple of the cheek and working my way up the cheekbone, and just did a little dabbing motion. And I want to go just a tiny hair darker on the actual apples of my cheek. So I'm going to go into this coral blush right here, and I'm just going to concentrate that right on the apple of the cheek, and I'm not going to go past the outside of my eye. Now, if you wanted to more like buff it into your skin, as some people like to do, I would take this top chiseled edge and point that toward the apple of your cheek and blend like this. But we are going to go back to my favorite duo fiber brush and go ahead and blend the blush that way, just so you can see it again in action. Now, I talked to you about a blush topper, and we are going to go ahead with that. This is technically not a topper, it's a blush. This is the NARS Orgasm Mini, which I am panning and not doing a very good job of it. This does not have a strong enough base pigment for me, so I use it as a topper. This is what I like to do, however, with very densely packed blushes. If they're very hard pressed, or let's say you have an hourglass blush that's got the swirling and you want to pick up all the different shades of pigment, the brush that I like for that is a very densely packed blush brush. You can see this is really densely packed. As I'm patting my fingers, there's no give to the bristles, and this is really good for buffing a blush topper or even a blush that is not super pigmented into your skin. And it's small, so it tends to perform in a more targeted area. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up some of the NARS Orgasm, tap off the excess, and I am going to buff very lightly, again, light pressure, wet cap pressure. Gonna buff that into the top of the apples as well as the rest of the cheekbone. I can't believe I've kept separate brush and blush the whole video. That doesn't normally happen. So there we are, we're looking pretty pink and glowy. I have two favorite highlight brush right now. I received a second of my favorite highlight brush this month in BOXYCHARM, but this is the Luxie 660 Precision Foundation Brush. I got this purple one in an Ipsy bag at some point, and then this month I got the pink and rose gold one from BOXYCHARM, and so these are exactly the same, and I don't mind having two. This is a nice paddle fluffy brush. It has the same softness as the Real Techniques blush brush. It is slightly pinched at the ferrule, but again, it's fluffy. So when you're looking at fluffy brushes, you want to think that fluffy means soft and diffused application, which is what I'm looking for when applying highlighter. Again, some people like a more targeted highlight and they want to use a smaller brush. That's totally cool with me. Also, I just wanted to give a mention, this is the Luxie 522 Tapered Highlighter brush, and the only difference about this one is it's a little bit, it has a round ferrule, so it's kind of like pinched all the way around, whereas this is more flat, if that makes sense, but essentially they perform the same way. So I'm going to use my favorite Luxie, and we are going to use the Essence Pure Nude. And here we go. The places I like to highlight, and I like this brush because it works for all the places that I want to highlight. I start up here on the temple and I buff in circular motions coming down the top of my cheekbones. And then I come back up here again and work down my cheekbones as well. And then if I'm feeling froggy, I'll do a little tiny highlight over each of the brows. Just very lightly, one tap into the product and distribute that between the two. And then down the nose, starting about here at the bridge and working it down, but not quite to the tip. And then I do the front tip of my nose, which you can probably see. There we go. And then one more tap into the product. I'm gonna go ahead and do the Cupid's bow. I try to keep it as low as possible. These ridges that go all the way up to under my nose, I don't really like to highlight those, just the Cupid's bow of the lips. And then no additional product. Lately I've been doing a little swirl action on the chin. I don't know why, I just like it. So I hope this was really helpful to you guys. It's kind of really hard sometimes to explain how I use my brushes, but I do know that people appreciate that, and I know I appreciate that because I had no idea. I had a blush brush and an eyeshadow brush when I started my journey in beauty, and now I have lots of brushes and I'm figuring out what my favorites are and how I like to use them. And as always on my journey in beauty, I just want to share that information with you in case it would be helpful in your everyday makeup routine. So I hope all of your makeup days are beautiful makeup days. Leave me a comment down below with your all-time favorite brush if you didn't see it in this video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye!